Right, welcome to part two of the Voice of Peace reunion. I know we've dealt with the 70s, but I just want to bring in Guy in just a few moments' time. And also going to start with Keith, because one thing we did forget to do, just when we were speaking to Keith before, was the installation of the FM, which was right at the beginning of the 1980s. So we're going to just start off very briefly with Keith. We've got John Dwyer here, who's going to be mentioning his time on the peace ship. Also got Guy Starkey, is it Gil? And Gil's going to talk about his time on the ship. Then we've got, is it Richard or is it? Well, Dickie Staines, and he does. Right. In joke. He's going to pop up. And also Nigel Harris, who's here, who was on, I believe the only person here who was actually on in the 1990s. So firstly, just going back to Keith.
Everyone should gather for a photo at the end.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, and everybody who's here from the Voice of Peace, the VOP, at the end, if you can just gather just behind us here, we just want a group photograph. That would be absolutely great. So, Keith is just going to talk us through when the ship went into Haifa, I think it was, wasn't it, Keith? And had all the FM equipment put on.
Well, is that working? Hello? I think it is. I already told you about steering through the storm and nearly colliding with a Turkish ship. But we eventually made it into Haifa. The pilot came on board, we got into Haifa. And we put it into port. And myself and Graham, who'd actually driven the ship all the way there, had the first 2 weeks shore leave, so I managed to get away for the first 2 weeks of carnage that went on. But in the meantime, when we got back, the entire crew were chipping the decks. They'd all been issued with these little chipping hammers. And we were going chink, 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 and knocking the paint off the decks, and then we had to paint them with red lead and went back in again. Eventually the boat went into dry dock, and the Lloyd's insurance people had to come on board to do the insurance for it. It had been sailing, I think, illegally before that, because once we left Haifa, it had to have a captain and 2 officers on it the entire time.
So how long was it? How long was it in dry dock for, Keith?
It was in there for about 2 months. It was unbelievable. When we sailed it in February of 1980, and I think we were there till April. And during that time, most of the people that were there left. All the DJs left. It was Kenny Page, Malcolm Barry, Glyn Davies. There's about 10 people all left. And the only people left were myself, I think, Steve Marshall and Nigel Roberts. You remember Nigel?
Yeah. Tall Nigel.
We used to wander around Haifa and people would say, to point at him and say, "Hey, Jesus."
He looked like him, didn't he? Really did.
But anyway, the FM came and we got the Harris Corporation came in. It was a turnkey job. I mean, no expenses spared. Like, I mean, AB had a pile of money for some reason at that point. And he got the Harris Corporation in. They built a brand new studio. The old mixer was taken out and put into production. The new equipment rack, stereo generators, all this kind of stuff, Optimods. Well, not Optimods, they didn't have that. They had similar kind of thing though. And a 20 kilowatt brand new shiny Harris FM 20K, which was the blue FM transmitter around the side there. That kind of 6 years later, myself and Norm had to dismantle because it was waterlogged and clean everything on it. But anyway, this all came in brand new, and it was absolutely fantastic. And the first song we played on it, while we were in port, we powered the transmitter up, got processing and everything going, got the studio going. And the first record we played was Song on the Radio by Al Stewart. And we played that one song, and then we turned it off again, just to make sure it was working, you know.
Just to test.
Like you do, you know.
That was the amazing thing about the ship. You know, it was supposed to be off the air whilst it sailed in, because this is another thing. Used to sail in, didn't it, to pick up provisions.
Oh,
and it was supposed to be off the air.
Time.
Yeah, just used to turn it on.
No, the transmitter was on before the ropes were off.
And away you went.
Yeah, but I mean, that was fantastic. Then after that, we sailed back out to sea again with a brand new, more or less reconditioned ship, and all the brand new FM gear on it and stuff like that. And they were saying, "Oh, the taxi drivers are listening in Jerusalem. You can hear it on FM. It's just brilliant." You know.
In fact, the FM went further than the AM, didn't it?
It did, yeah, at that time, yeah. It was banging out. It was fantastic, and the sound of it was so powerful because I mean, you compare it to the FM you hear in the UK or here at that time was very flat, but they had the brand American processing on it. It was pumping, like, you know, it was very. It was
very
sound,
loud.
Very strong sound to it, and And it really blew everyone away when we went on 100 FM.
Okay, lovely. Well, thanks a lot for that.
We kind of tagged this 100 FM thing onto the end of it. Then, of course, after that, you came out.
Oh.
And after that, the ship nearly sank. Do you know this guy here? He went on his first shore leave. He spent the entire week, 24 hours a day, 7 days, in Schmullick's pub in Bennyhuda Street. And when he got back out to the boat, we actually had to tie ropes around him to pull him back on. He couldn't climb the ladder. Anyway, that's my bit.
Lovely. Thank you, Keith. Thank you for that. He left on a note. Thank you, Keith. I do remember that. Well, I don't remember the incident, but I do remember the next day.
Remember it.
Lovely, the next few days. Just go back to Guy Starkey. Guy, you were there in the 70s, yeah?
I was. I haven't got a microphone either
Oh.
at the moment. Shall I come
Yeah.
round there? Or,
Yeah,
I'll give him this thing. You've got to have a microphone, haven't you, if you're a radio presenter? Yeah, I don't think people quite realise that a lot of people who went out to Voice of Peace were actually quite young. I was 18 when I stepped on board on Christmas Day 1977, and I think that most of us who went there in our tender years went there because it was actually a lot cheaper to get somebody out to Israel on a youth ticket, and you had to be under 26 to get the youth ticket. So there was this stream of people coming out from the UK to Israel to be on the Voice of Peace, and what a fantastic experience it was. You know, as an 18-year-old stepping on, you know, the dream come true. Anybody interested in offshore radio, wanting a career in radio, to actually step onto the deck of a pirate radio ship, an offshore radio ship, even if it is Christmas Day and you're missing Christmas at home, what an experience. And there are so many anecdotes coming out of all of us. If you get any kind of sense of what it was like, I think that sense must be that it's one of those milestone experiences in anybody's life doing this kind of thing. And listening to the experience that people were talking about before, when they were talking, there was a little bit of a discussion going on. And I was sat at the front thinking, well, this is more interesting than hearing myself talk about my own experiences. But I also have a thought to add to the discussion about the station. And over 20 years, because it's a 20-year history of this radio station, I was there for something like 7 months. And to me, those 7 months were kind of like a roller coaster, mixing the metaphors. But if over just my 7 months it was like a roller coaster, the fortunes up, the fortunes down, then what must it have been like over the 20 years? And we've all got our own sort of section of that history that we can recall. And when I first stepped on board the ship, there was a single advertiser talking about money and there was only one advertiser, there was only one paid advert, and that was Schneidman, who was a tailor in Tel Aviv, and I believe he was a good friend of Abi's. And then about 6 weeks in, the unions at the Israeli Broadcasting Authority declared a strike, and there was some terrible strike, everybody was out. And suddenly, of course, the advertisers in Israel, who'd become very accustomed to advertising on Reshit Gimel, Reshit Bet, Reshit Aleph, presumably, they couldn't advertise on Israeli radio. So these advertisers who'd shunned the Voice of Peace for months, I don't know how long before that point, suddenly they were knocking on Abi's door, and we had 10, 12, 13, 14 minutes of ads an hour because we were constantly getting more ads arriving, and of course we were playing them, because after a lean time, suddenly we had the opportunity to have some real serious money coming in. Again, I don't know where the money went, but it's just, from going from one advertiser to having dozens of advertisers and lots of money, lots of commercial airtime. That was a roller coaster for me, and I'm sure for many of us it was ups and downs in many ways, but a truly exciting and thrilling time. Yes, absolutely, yes, yeah.
Yeah, it was. There were so many different occasions, mad occasions, happy occasions. In some ways, it was very organised. When I went there in '85, I remember going through Gatwick Airport. I can't remember why, but I think it was probably cheaper. And I had a 50-penny coin, which was just enough to phone from a public coin box in the airport and saying, "I'm coming to Tel Aviv. I'll be there at 3:15 local time." Beep, beep, beep. That was all. But they were waiting for me. Got there at Tel Aviv, and the sun was going down. It was warm, and it was lovely. It was delicious. We'd had a bad summer that year in Holland. And the driver said, "Oh, well, okay, I'll take you to the hospital, and then we'll go to the office." I said, "The hospital? What are you going to the hospital for?" He said, "Oh, you're going to work for us. You've got to be medically checked out. You're not going on that ship unless the doctor says you're in order." I said, "Oh, well, fair enough, okay." So I went to the hospital. But the doctor had had a day off or whatever, so he wandered around about half an hour. I took me to my hotel and met Don Stevens, whatever the hell. So we went out on the drink. The next morning I thought, well, I better not go to the doctor now. He might find something not quite right with my blood. So I, instead of going to the office at 10 o'clock, which was the idea, I was just wandering around somewhere. And we didn't have mobile phones in those days. Nobody could find me. Got back to the office about 6 o'clock in the evening, and Amy said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Oh, what? Did you need me? I mean, the ship's not going. Are you looking for me? Me?" She said, "Oh, get here tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We want you to go to the hospital and be checked out." Well, the next morning I was there, but there was no driver. I think after the third or fourth day, I was eventually taken to the doctor's house. In his house, he examined me, and the strange thing was that the driver sat beside me while this doctor was sponging my chest and knocking hammers on my knees. The driver sat beside me, which is the way they do things in Israel, because in Israel, if you're a man, you're a soldier, and you're all soldiers amongst each other, and if you're a woman, you are the lover or the mother of another soldier. So it's perfectly normal to sit there naked with your driver while the doctor's looking in your ears and looking you through it, whatever. However, Johnny, I'll give you the lulaphone.
Good afternoon. First of all, things have been changed since you were in Israel last time. It became much more modern country, I would say. You invite the doctor to your house now. You don't have to go out. Okay, I joined the MVPs on July 85. That was the date. And I owe my career to a strike, you know? The story, to make a long story short, I'll try to put it in a couple of sentences. AB asked the DJs on the board to have a Motorola watch every night, to keep the Motorola every night in a watch just in case he wants to say something to the DJs during night. And one night he shouted, I don't know, he wanted to say something, he shouted at the Motorola, hello peace, and quiet. Nobody came through. And then he fired all the DJs. No, sorry, he fired the DJ that was supposed to be on duty this night. But all the DJs went on strike because of this fire. And then Reuven Levy, who was AB's assistant, called me on the phone and said, well, I know that I have a list of DJs here and your name is here. You want to be a DJ on the Voice of Peace, so come, because there are no DJs at the moment. So I really thanked him and say that it's a really good opportunity to try a radio career. And I went on the Voice of Peace, and Dave Fortune was the program controller those days. And he said to me, there are 3 rules when you broadcast here on the Voice of Peace. First of all, you have to keep short links. That's AB's demand. Second, you have to make the program tight. You have to play song by song, wall to wall, without gaps, without interruptions. And the third rule, you should not crash vocals of songs. I mean, you speak up to the vocals on the intro, and that's all. And these 3 sentences followed me all my career years up till now. I've been working on Call Israel, the Israeli radio station, the national radio station, and on Galei Tzahal, the army station. And I made the voiceovers for TV and all kinds of things. And I think that the best school of radio was on the Voice of Peace. There's no doubt. And I owe this career to AB and to the Voice of Peace and to the strike, of course.
Seems to be a thing, strikes, doesn't it? Thank you, Gil. John Dwyer, who was out there in the 80s, John?
84, 85.
Okay, tell us about your time out there and how you got involved.
My first trip to Israel, 84, it was a bit daunting arriving at Ben Gurion Airport and then to jump on the bus to Tel Aviv and find that somebody who was younger than me was toting a gun on the bus, so a big rifle. It was a bit surprising. After that, I sort of got on board the peace ship after about 2 days to be confined to the cabin because the weather was so rough, because there was a big swell coming down from Cyprus, which meant that the peace ship, not being too heavy, bounced around like a cork in the water. Then I was instructed to make announcements in the studio, because even then it was too rough to do live programs. So the 10-inch reels were rolling round, and every 15 minutes I just simply said, due to inclement weather conditions, we were unable to bring irregular programs. The actual studio chair, which at that time was an armchair, was strapped to the desk, and I had a pillow and just simply went like that for 15 minutes in between links. After that, I got an okay, generally with AB, who did insist on these short links very rigorously, 10-second links, 10 to 15 seconds maximum, because there was a speaker right above the desk, right above there, and he had this Motorola that he could key in from the car or his home, and if you went over the prescribed time, he would simply, key in the usual thing, hello peace, who's on the air right now, which you'd have to answer off air who you were, and he'd give you the telling off. It could be quite mild, like it's 17 seconds and this is not a talk show. If you really wanted to, shall I use the phrase, bollock you, he would ask you to leave the studio and go and find somebody else around. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning, in which case you'd have to go and get somebody out of bed. And bearing in mind there was no CD players then, it was all vinyl. So you were racing around the ship trying to find people to drag in to spin records for you. He would then call you up to the bridge and then give you a good 5-minute dressing down and threaten you with imminent tender back to the mainland. That was it, So it was good training, because it was his radio station. He wanted the links to be short, and generally they were, and that was the case. From a DJ point of view, when I was there, one of the humorous points was the captain on the ship. I think his name was Captain Aardveld. And he was Dutch captain of elderly years, and I think that the peace ship was this sort of retirement in which he was anchored at a position off the Tel Aviv coast with a bunch of DJs, not seamen, apart from 1 or 2 crew members, cook and an engineer here and there. And what really came to light was when the ship went in once a month to Ashdod for water and fuel, all of a sudden the station would go off the air at 2 o'clock in the morning, prescribed time to go in for 7 a.m. to refuel. And the person who drew the short straw would be in the chain locker with a big piece of metal with an iron hook at the top of it, usually the last DJ to join the ship. And their instruction was to drag the chain in an orderly fashion, which is not easy. You've also got, in the dark of night, a Dutch captain who was shouting nautical instructions about make fast to a bunch of DJs who were about 20 years of age, who have at most been on a ferry boat. And when he can't make his instructions understood in English in the dark, he starts swearing in Dutch. And how anybody, while I was there, didn't lose their life, I don't know. It was quite amusing, especially if you're in the chain locker, watching all these tons of chains coming down with seaweed on. And you've got a very short piece of metal to save you from being flattened. The Dutch captain was quite good. There was once there was an American 20-year-old, 23-year-old, 25-year-old who'd swum out from Tel Aviv, from the beach, who we gather was quite tasty, and she swam all the way out to the peace ship. However, the captain, being the captain, would not let her on board. He wouldn't have it at all, despite pleas from the ever-eager DJs to see a bit of female. And there was an Israeli police boat who came out to pick her up, take her back to the shore. There was one time when I was on shore leave. I think we used to do 3 weeks on and 1 week off. I think there were 8 DJs, 6 used to run the station, 2 hours off. And I was walking along, I think we used to stay at the Marina Hotel then. I've still got the coat hanger at home.
The Astor Hotel.
Astor, maybe it was a promoted to the Astor. When I was there, it was the Marina Hotel. I was walking along the front, the promenade, which is fairly close to where the ship was, about 2.5 miles away. And there were a couple of Americans just walking along there, and I was just walking along, seeing all the lights. It was nice, clear, nice. And I just overheard these two, this American couple saying, so I'm like, gee, Harry, see that ship out there? And she goes, yeah, yeah. I said, that crew must be working hard. She said, it was there last night. There must be an awful lot of fish in that area for them to be working. I hope there's no Americans in the audience tonight.
There is one.
Sorry about that. I had a bit of a smile on that, really. Yeah. There were so many things about being on the peace ship. I went there for 6 months in '84, went back again in '85, worked with Keith and Don Stevens, and Bob was there as well. Just amusing things, but we used to have this piece of music, apart from the Perry Como, the sunset. We used to play AB's speech about as the sun goes down, and then the 30-second silence, followed by the Eagles. And it was drive time. That was the program that it went out on. However, I don't know whether it was a prank or whatever, but as with the sunset, it changes all the time. And there's more than one occasion when I was there that AB was saying, as the sun now sets over the Mediterranean, and the usual thing. Of course, it was 35 degrees of heat, and it was a blue sky with the sun still up there, because nobody bothered to tell the DJ that you have to move it around about 3 minutes per night. Maybe just a bit of a prank, really, But I had a good time there. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. And only once was I on shore in the back of AB's white van with the bit bolted on the top. Going back to how I first started off, when the DJ was speaking. And as soon as the DJ started speaking, up came his watch, and he was timing them straight away. So no matter where he was, the 10 to 15 second link applied if he heard the station. But other than that, I enjoyed the two stints I was out there.
Okay, lovely. That's brilliant, John. Thanks to Guy. You got any more memories, or? Yep. And what I'm going to do in just a moment is Richard, you come up, and also Chris Pearson as well. Thanks to Gil and also to John there. Okay. But I know Guy was out there in the 70s, but any particular memories that stick in your mind while the other two are coming up?
It's difficult really to just say there is this one memory or these two or three, because I think we've all got so many. But there's a lot of talk about the Motorola, and I don't know if everybody realises that this was a direct communication, and it was shared with Avis. So there were two companies who actually used this one frequency for this direct communication. And so it could have been a communication for Avis, or it could have been a communication for us. And it actually came up in the lounge, so it was actually quite a nice place to sit. But before the Motorola arrived, because this was new technology, the Motorola, before the Motorola arrived, the job was to actually sit up on the bridge in the radio and listen to the ship-to-shore radio, and to be monitoring, I think it was Channel 8 or Channel 16, Channel 8 of the ship-to-shore radio, just listening out for the words, peace, peace, this is AB. And if the words peace, peace, this is AB rang out on the ship-to-shore radio, and there was nobody there on radio watch, then there would be trouble. There'd be a lot of trouble afterwards. And one of the things that, because I think we all worked quite hard when we were there, I hear some people just did their programs and had 3 weeks on and then 1 week off. That wasn't actually my experience. But when I went on, to actually, from my second day on the peace ship, to be doing the breakfast show, so being on air from 6 a.m. till 9 a.m., and then to have I can't remember if it was a 2-hour or a 3-hour radio watch sitting on the bridge waiting for AB to call. That was really quite hard work, I thought, at the time. And then at the back of your mind, you're thinking, and I'm doing Drive this afternoon, or I'm doing the classical program. But, you kind of loved it in a way that you perhaps wouldn't necessarily have admitted at the time. So that's the Motorola and the ship to shore. And I think one of the funniest times, it was very tense, but occasionally it's a dangerous situation out there. Still was then. And from time to time, there would be a security alert. And there was one evening, it was pitch black, when we suddenly got a security alert that there was a small boat with what were described, it's gone quiet. There was a small boat with what were described as terrorists on this boat. And the Israeli authorities were really worried about our safety. So we'd had this message that perhaps we could be at risk. And so we were tense. And we were told to stick together rather than to be isolated around the ship, because if somebody boarded the ship and we were on our own, then something could happen to us and nobody'd know about it. This was the kind of mood of the moment. And so, as much as we could, we went about our business, and we had our dinner and various other things. And of course, somebody was in the studio, be on air. And then I needed to go from one place to another, I can't remember, on the ship. And I heard running. And I saw flowing garments. And actually, it was Bill Bennett, dressed up in his image of what a terrorist would look like. And he'd done this to wind us all up. So we were extremely worried until we realised just what was going on. And it added a bit of joviality, levity to the situation. Okay.
That's excellent. Thanks very much for that, Guy. Great to have you here as well. But yeah, just thinking about 3 weeks on, 1 week off. I think the shortest I ever did on there was 13 weeks, but I think it was after Keith was explaining when I spent a week in a pub. Amy just wouldn't let me off after that. I was stuck on the flipping thing. Right, I'm going to bring in Richard and Chris Pearson. Chris Pearson, Richard Staines, Dickie Staines. What were you out there?
Tricky Dicky.
Tricky Dicky. Some of us use different names, like, I was Stephen Bishop, Johnny Moss in Israel, Johnny Lewis now. Oh, I get confused as well. But anyway, can you say, Richard, any memories you've got on how you got involved? You were out there, the 80s, mid-80s?
Yeah, I went out in April 1986. I have fantastic memories of the Voice of Peace, not all about the radio station, but about friendship and personalities. John Dwyer talked about the captain. I don't want to correct John, but I seem to recall his name was Tunis Aldijk. But he was this old Dutch captain, and he had been on the boat for 20 years. But I remember one afternoon he was sending a wedding anniversary card to his wife. And I said, "Are you married?" And he said, "Yeah." And he described his perfect marriage, which was never having to go home to see her. I'm traveling with three friends, or two friends, and there's three of us here in the Netherlands. And from the particular period when I was there, and I've been trying to hide stories of some of the things that made us laugh so I can regurgitate them now, but this came to mind when John spoke about Tunis Aldijk, but there was a policy that no one was allowed on the boat, and at weekends, Shabbat, boats would come out, and there was one particular day that this powerboat came out, well, obviously a very rich guy, and there were two girls on board, and they were quite naked, and they were also quite beautiful. And the crew, my colleague Ray Sarsfield, who is from Ireland, Dublin, Ireland, or he's a resident of Dublin, from Waterford. He was on the air at the time, and therefore the only Irish voice on the Voice of Peace. And these girls came out, and we were hanging over the side like rabid dogs. And we wanted them to come aboard, but Tunis Aldijk was having none of it. And one of the girls shouted out, "Which one of you is Irish?" And there was, 6 of us on board, and we all went, "Ray!" I remember when I arrived in Tel Aviv, we stayed in the Astor Hotel, but myself and Ray and Chris went drinking first of all, and we discovered on the first night that they put, is it formaldehyde in the beer? And we were drinking lots of beer like we would drink back home, and the headaches we got the following day. But we met this guy in the bar, and we had no knowledge of him, and his name was Tony Challand. He was one of the deckhands when we were there, and one of the great characters at the time I was there. And he was an auctioneer or something. Yeah, he was he had this lisp. He spoke a bit like this, and he's going, yeah, Voice of Peace. I'm on the Voice of Peace, and we're thinking, yeah, you are right, But anyway, we had an incredible amount of beer, and we went back to the hotel, and we all got into bed, and the peace ship crew all shared the same room, but we all had single beds, and this banging on the door. We were all fast asleep. This banging on the door happened at like 2 a.m. He's going, let me in, let me in. And we were going, go away, we'll call the police. But anyway, he really was the crew hand, and he came out to the ship with us, and we just thought he was going to kill us. But anyway, that's just a couple of stories. Just very briefly, maybe stuff that people have forgotten. I remember arriving in the hotel room, switching on the bedside radio, hearing the Voice of Peace for the first time. And I couldn't work out why the announcer, who was Keith Lewis at the time, was given the wrong time. And it turned out that AB didn't agree with the change of time in Israel. So for the first, I think the first 6 weeks we were there, it was like, it's 4:10, Voice of Peace, summertime. And, you know, we just thought this was crazy. And the other thing that was crazy at the time, although I later learned why, was that we were advertising water. And I thought, you know, this is a commercial radio station. Why are we advertising water? But it was to get back at the agency because they dropped the Coca-Cola account or something like that. But so there's some crazy memories. But out of it came lifetime friendship. I'm very proud that Ray's daughter, Emma, who's now 18, is my godchild. She's given him a little bit of trouble, which is why he's gone grey. But and there's Chris, who I've remained friends with, and all these guys on my shirt all had a career in radio afterwards. You know, like the late 80s was not a bad time on the Voice of Peace. It was very, very good, actually, and it's indelibly stamped on my mind. My time out there was a fantastic opportunity, so thank you, AB.
Well done. I think I might be right in saying this. The reason for the water ad has something to do with Tony Allen. Yeah. Have you heard the story? Yes. Yeah. We're advertising Coca-Cola on the radio station. Am I right in this, Don? You know more about this than me. Correct. Yeah, and Tony Allen went on the air after the Coca-Cola ad and said, "Do you want to drink that stuff? It rots your guts."
Is that when they dropped?
That was it, wasn't it? Yeah. Henceforth, they dropped the ad, and AB said, "Right, that's it, we're advertising water from now on." That's it, drink cool, refreshing water, yeah.
Actually, I do have one quick story, which I haven't told the guys. Remember, I was saying that I wanted to hide a story, but there was a program, I think it was early on a Saturday morning, called Arabic Showcase. It was one of these many nonsense programs that the Voice of Peace used to broadcast, and I drew the short straw for it, and it was almost impossible to tolerate listening to this music, so I used to pre-record it, and I used the time to write home to my family, back in the days when we used to use pens and paper. And I'd pre-record it, but even when I was pre-recording it, I couldn't bear to listen to this wailing music. I used to go into the library, and there was 12-inch discs which had just one track on them. You couldn't understand what was written on the label. And apparently it was a big hit with Arabic taxi drivers in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but I don't really believe that. However, in the production studio, I'd prepare the Arabic showcase, and I'd say something in English, and then start the track, and then I'd go upstairs to the mess room to watch the TV. Meanwhile, the guys were, I'd come down maybe 15 minutes later to flip the disc over and make an announcement, but as soon as I'd sneak out the room, they'd flip it back. So for some while, I mean, this went on for weeks, basically the same song was being played over and over and over. I had no idea. Arabic Showcase.
And the other one is playing them at the wrong speed. So you can't even know. Right, just want to bring in Chris Pearson now. Chris, your time.
Okay, same time as Steve and Ray, 1986. But I think life was, it was a love-hate relationship with AB. It was a series of small battles, which you were never going to win the war with AB, but there were a series of small battles which would sort of help keep you a bit sane that you do. And I remember one of the guys that was working for us, a guy called Mark Warner, who had worked in Australia for a while. I can't remember if he was actually Australian, but the other program that we were doing was the Russian program that was mentioned earlier. So Mark hit on a great idea of doing a Russian top 10 countdown. So he basically dug out 10 copies of the Russian drinking song Kalinka. They were different versions, and he did a chart countdown. So, you know, in at number 10, it's the the Russian State Choral Choir with Kalinka, which he played, and then down from last week's 5 to this week's 9. Was Kalinka, did the whole thing, and it was just small things like that that just help keep you sane with the captain. The captain again, Steve mentioned the captain with going in and out of port. I remember between Tel Aviv and Ashdod is a military firing range, which you're meant to avoid. You're meant to sail out down and back in. And I didn't think Tunis always quite bothered with that. But one day it was a bit misty and we were out on deck chatting and Tunis was up on the steering his boat and having a good time. And he suddenly realised he was lost. Couldn't see the shore anymore, lost, don't know where we are. So he came out on the bridge and in a very captain and professional way shouted, "I don't know where we are, I'm lost. One of you's going to have to come and help me." And at that point he just went back to his cabin and left us. So Radha, the Indian chef, and myself had a map. What? If we turn left, I said, I think we should hit land eventually, which is what we did, but I think we must have gone through the middle of the firing range to do it. But yeah, there were lots of little things with the captain, God bless him. He was a bit of a novel experience. But I think it was just those, as Steve said, and so many people have mentioned, it was the friendships you made, the crazy stuff you tried to do to keep yourself sane. One that I do remember, and we were talking about this last night, was...
I don't remember last night.
No, not much of last night. But AB decided we should have a Beatles day. It's a Beatles only day, which okay, fine. It was just one of those things. We'll live with it. So I took a reel of tape and I recorded AB Nathan is a, and it wasn't very polite, the last word I used, and we flipped the tape around and mixed it into Strawberry Fields, which was then played about 15 times that day with this subliminal backwards message, which fortunately no one ever heard. But again, it was just little things like that would try to keep you sane. But I think the other one was shore leave, actually, just going off on shore leave and having a good time, given the chance to sort of see Israel. Great country, been back on holiday a few times.
Meet Israeli girls.
And Irish nurses in Jerusalem. Terrible thing. Yeah, good times, basically.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Chris. Now, just want to bring in... Oh, sorry. There you go. Get a round of applause. Well done. Just want to bring in Nigel because time is pressing on here. And Nigel Harris, who you know from Caroline, but was also out on the Voice of Peace. I think the only person here who was in the 90's. Yep. Can you tell us a bit about that? You were there for the last knock-ins, really. I don't think that works, so you'll have to use this one.
Push this one down. Yeah. Well, quite why I left it so late to go to the Voice of Peace, I really don't know, because as you know, Johnny went down in the early 80s, and so many of my colleagues on the Mi Amigo were down there so much earlier than I did, but it just never happened. I think when the Mi Amigo sank, I went across to Ireland to work on this Radio Paradise thing for a while, instead of going to Ireland to Israel. And the Ross Revenge came on the air, I went there, and then the Voice of Peace thing, Caroline had gone off the air in 91 or 90, I think, late 90, and I was at a loose end, and one of the other guys from Caroline had gone down there, so I thought I'll go down. So he passed a message on to Kenny Page, who was down there at the time, and Kenny went to AB and said, I've got this chap called Nigel, who I worked with on Caroline. Oh, get him down. He obviously knows something about radio, which is wrong. But I went down there in 91, May 91. I'll tell you what, having spent so many years on Caroline, it still ranks so highly in my memories of working on offshore radio. But the thing was, having done Caroline for so long, I was amazed. The first thing I saw when I got out there was I could actually see the anchor chain going under the water. It was blue. And having spent so many years in the North Sea, it was just brown, and it stopped when it hit the sea. That's my most vivid memory of the first trip out to the ship. But it was nice to work with Kenny Page, who'd been to Caroline back in the 70s. I didn't actually, as far as I can remember, meet him in those days. But he was such a lovely fellow, and it's so sad he's not with us anymore. And we just had a fantastic time. It's a shame there's nobody else from the 90s or late 80s. Anyone late 80s here? No? Makes me sound quite young, that, doesn't it? Yeah. But no, I did 6 and a bit months down there. And as you've heard so many times, AB was such a character. He told me off for pumping fuel the wrong way once. I'll never forget that. Quite what the right way to pump fuel is, I don't know. But I was only following my instructions. But the thing was, we were... Alcoholics is the wrong word to use. But we drank a lot of vodka down on the Voice of Peace. And AB didn't allow alcohol in my day. He relented later. He allowed us about 3 cans of lager a week. Eventually, but when I was there was no alcohol, but we had to get some on board, so we used to buy melons. I'm sure it was done by others years and years back, and drill holes in them and fill it with vodka and then slap the lid back on and take it out to the ship, and then we'd stupidly drink it all in one night. And I remember Kenny was doing, as was just mentioned, the Russian hour in English with a Russian accent. which went plus huge copious amounts of alcohol, and it was just probably worse than any of the drunk radio I ever did on Caroline. It was absolutely outrageous, and how we got away with it, I've no idea. But there's so many funny stories. We had a thing, I don't know if it happened in other people's days. The pizza boat would come out from Tel Aviv, delivering pizza on a small launch. Oh, we were treated well.
Wow. Bloody hell.
So, I mean...
home deliveries.
Yeah, it was. They'd come on board and we'd eat pizza, drink. They bring alcohol as well, but we do all that. And then they disappear into the night again. But so, I mean, it's difficult to encapsulate so many fun times out there. And we're running out of time now, so I better wrap up. But yeah, those 6 months rank equally amongst my Caroline stuff. I love the Voice of Peace. And AB was a lovely man. So that was my little time out there.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Nigel. Do you want to skip it? No, go on, do it. Yeah, do it. We're in two minds whether to do this. We'll do it, yeah? I think we'll do it. Yeah. There was one very sad occasion. I wasn't out there at the time, but there was one very sad occasion on the Voice of Peace where I think you guys were there, weren't you? Somebody committed suicide. Do you want to just go through that?
Really, let's bring it up here, yeah. Probably a good example of the two extremes that you had on the Voice of Peace, because what started out brilliantly well, unfortunately then sort of turned out very sadly, but we'd been off air for a good week or so with generator problems. And a very quick sideline story to that, there's a chap called Dave Shearer, who's now the boss at the Wave on the south coast, who won't thank me for telling this story, but he was due to go on shore leave, and one of the generator engineers had brought his wife out with him to come and look at the peace ship, and she'd obviously been as sick as a dog on the trip on the way out there, and spent the whole of her time on the peace ship with a hanky over her mouth looking green. And Dave was going on shore leave. He said, "Oh, just before I go, I'm going to use the toilet." So he went downstairs to use the toilet. Unfortunately, while he was in there, he could hear banging on the door. It was this woman. He didn't know it was a woman. He hadn't even seen her come on board. So eventually, he was fed up with the banging on the door, so he opened the door, couldn't flush the toilet because the generator's off, opened the door, I've been having a saw this woman's face with a hanky over her mouth. Before he could stop her and do anything, she went and put her head down the toilet because she was going to be violently sick. You don't even want to go there, so Dave won't thank me for that. But we eventually got to Ashdod, and all of the disc jockeys decided to go off and have a few beers for the first time together. Absolutely everyone. It was a great night. We invited everyone, including a chap called Noel Fortunato, who was the Filipino deckhand. And he didn't want to come. That was fine. So we went off. We actually illegally entered Israel because
sorry to interrupt, Chris. That's an important point. AB would confiscate our passports. So when we arrived at Ashdod, it was remarkable. I had no idea that this offshore pirate radio station actually sailed into harbour for provisions. So when we actually got there, we thought, right, let's go for beer. And we'd sneak into Israel without passports. And what happens next is quite interesting, because when we returned to the boat, we thought that we were in deep trouble. There were so many police around, but Chris will pick up the story.
We had a great night, fantastic. Ended up getting back to Ashdod about 6 in the morning, and as Steve says, as we walked to the ship, it was surrounded by police, and we thought, oh, this is because of the passport thing, we're all going to be in deep poo here. But it wasn't that at all. Eventually, Keith Lewis hadn't come with us. One of the DJs had stayed on the ship, and he called us over and walked to the ship, and he said, he's dead, he's killed himself. And it was Noel, the deckhand, I beg your pardon, had taken his own life in the hold. And that was why the police were there. And I just remember AB turning up then, nobody being allowed on the ship, and eventually, obviously it was a very hard time to try and bring everyone back around from that, to try and get it back up. But I think what got us through that, because obviously it's not very pleasant, that's happened on a ship that you've got to carry on living on and eating on and sleeping on and being with a group of guys, was just the camaraderie. It was the friendship that everybody had. It was just that's what got us through. And I think that probably more than anything to me demonstrated what the peace ship was and what the Voice of Peace was about. So.
Right, just before we round it up, just want to mention a couple of things, really. Once again, thank you very much to Martin and Hans and everybody who's organised the event. I think they've done an absolutely splendid job. A heck of a lot of work does go into these radio days, and I know that there'll probably be tomorrow planning next year's, if not already. But 10th of November next year. But it's been a Voice of Peace Day, and hopefully you've enjoyed some of the stories. But just before we go, can we just remember some people who are sadly no longer with us? Tony Allen, Crispy and St John, Kenny Page, Tony Mandel, and the rest of the Voice of Peace family as well. Yeah, and also, at a time like this, spare a thought for AB as well.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, I should have said a lot earlier. We should all, many a time. Oh shit!
Hello, Feast.
Hello, Amy. Yeah. The one person who we really should have had here was Tony Allen. It's a great pity that he isn't here. Although knowing Tony, it wouldn't surprise me if he's
Up there somewhere.
somewhere around here. Yeah, what he did to everybody who couldn't make it today. Well, we're all here, all thinking about you, and whatever. Let's.
And just one other quick thing. Everybody who worked on the Voice of Peace, if you can come at the back here, we've got a photo. Want to do a photo?
Yeah, please,
So,
come on, all of you.
Come on, all at the back. And thank you very much for listening. For listening to us as well today.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Yeah. Good man. Well done.